I'm here with another grower tip about the size of plants that you might want to grow inside, and also a little bit about what costs most. The plants I have here now are about 4 foot in diameter. This includes the jalapeno plant, as well as a dwarf tomato plant that's more of a bush style. Now, fortunately, most people think about the lighting cost, and that's a good idea because with the new high efficiency lights, you can get by with fewer watts. The light that I have over the jalapeno plant is only pulling 98 true watts, and the light over the tomato plant is close to 100 watts. So for about 200 watts, I've got 32 square feet of plants. Now, with that in mind, let's go on to what really starts to cost money. To save these bucks, let's start talking about nutrient use and plant size. So how much do nutrients cost? Consider that a gallon of nutrient varies quite a bit among manufacturers, but oftentimes it's the small change that really adds up. The container that I'm using is about 12 gallons in size, and the nutrients would typically take me through several weeks. But once the plants that I have started to grow, to maintain the size plants that I have started to take up all the nutrients, all 12 gallons, in about every 7 days. And it's not just the cost of maintaining the nutrients, refilling and replenishing the nutrients. It's also the cleaning. As you can see that some of the nutrients will settle out along the sides of the container, and it's best to clean those completely clean, wipe down, rinse out the filter, and set up again. In addition to the cost of lighting and nutrients, there's other things to consider also, such as your time when it comes to cleanup, because all the blossoms that are usually on plants, such as this tomato plant, or even the blooms and old leaves from a pepper plant, if you shake the plants, you'll see how very much drops. And this is a regular occurrence. A handheld vacuum will be beneficial, but keep in mind that this is actually another distraction from your time in terms of an automated grow. For comparison's sake, this pepper is being grown in what is called an AeroGarden Bounty, and I do not need to add as much nutrient to keep this going. It requires about a weekly top off and constant pruning to keep it to this size. The issue that might be with this smaller setup is not that it's easier to maintain. It's just that all the frequent pruning takes up a lot of the plant's vigor, and it takes longer to produce peppers. As you can see that this plant normally matures in about 70 days, and it has been 171 days without seeing any peppers. Another factor to consider looking at this Trecaan unit is plants in small containers may not grow as large or produce as heavily. The jalapeno plant is the same age as the pepper plant that I showed you in the AeroGarden, but it's much more massive in size. Given that I have this growing in a large 6.6 gallon self-watering container using hydroponic nutrient, it does take into account some of the variance. However, one of the primary differences is that I've been enjoying jalapenos off of this plant for quite a while now. The Cherry Falls dwarf tomato plant is quite viney, and it literally has hundreds of flowers upon it. Now, I did get quite a few tomatoes coming on and ripening at one time, but since that time, I've just enjoyed a few here and there. So, in regards to the performance and the cost of maintaining the tomato plant, I would say that it is more costly based off of the less frequent harvest as the jalapeno plant, which tends to put on a continual set of new pods. So if you're looking to get the most out of your indoor grow, the high efficiency lights that I spoke about earlier are a great way to start out. And when it comes to plant selection, typically there are what is called indeterminate as well as determinate. Now, for those varieties of vegetables that are indeterminate, such as tomatoes, they may only put on a few tomatoes here and there throughout a long period of time. It's okay outdoors, but when you're paying for the electricity and the nutrients indoors, that's not such a great thing. So the determinate varieties are something to look for because they can put on anywhere 24 to 48 ripe tomatoes all at one point in time. Those could be harvested, and then you could replace the plant and have another large set of fruit that you can select from. So that keeps a steady harvest going. One of the best ways to do that is to always have plants available to move into a final grow out area. That's why I use the AeroGarden behind me here, because it allows me to mature my plants. They start from seed and go to a nice size, whereas I could put them into a larger grow out system such as the AutoPot XL. Now, another thing that you might want to keep in mind is that while the plants behind me here are about 4 foot in diameter, that is not an optimal size. As a matter of fact, you're probably wanting to look for something that's going to be no more than about 24 inches in height and 24 inches in diameter that still produces heavily. Read reviews on seeds and you'll find out that there's a lot of plants that are available which would be candidates for that type of a grow. The low wattage that I use in the AeroGarden, 40 watts, allows me to stage several plants at the same time and always have something that's available to put under a 100 watt light and grow out to maturity. The other thing to keep in mind is that the AutoPot XL system is gravity fed from a 12-gallon reservoir, so there's no electricity that is being used to circulate nutrients throughout a system. No nutrient changes, it's very hands-off, and it's an easy way for a lot of people who have a busy schedule to be able to garden indoors. Consider also that you can use granular fertilizers in a pot such as the AutoPot. Using coco coir with granular fertilizers will give you the opportunity to save cost on hydroponic nutrient. And since a lot of growers toss out their coco coir into a garden area when they're done growing, there's no great loss in terms of one system with nutrients from a hydroponic vendor versus another system with granular hydroponics. As a matter of fact, in testing both, I find that they're approximately equally well. And the container size is another great thing to consider too, because, for example, the AeroGarden behind me here will never grow plants to a full 24-inch diameter, 24-inch height. And you'll have to constantly prune to keep the plants within the realms of that particular garden unit. Now, when you do that, it does reduce the vigor and delays the fruiting. So, as mentioned earlier in the video, the pepper plant over here and the pepper plant over here are the same age. And you can see that while one is diminutive, the other one is quite large, and fruiting has been producing pods for a number of weeks now. So with the container size, look for something that you put in and grow out your plant to maturity. And keep in mind that hydroponic systems will oftentimes double the size of a plant. So you could have a 24-inch diameter plant that's perfect for a system, but when you put it in hydroponics, it can easily hit 36, 48 inches, just because of the nature of hydroponics, because the plant with a constant source of nutrient water is always trying to transpire that excess water off of the leaves. That's why the leaves and the branching and the size of the plant is the way that it is in a hydroponic system. One more thing to consider would be that instead of a 4-foot diameter plant, is that if you're using the 24-inch diameter plants, then you could cluster plants underneath a grow light. And you'll find that with determinate varieties, especially if you have 4 determinate plants versus 1 huge plant, you can actually get a greater harvest from the 4 plants versus the 1 larger plant.